or there's something outside the job environment that's contributing to these problems. And then you would want to get commitment from the employee to resolve the problems. Right? Then you'd want to follow up a month or two later, or maybe a couple of weeks later. So the bottom line is look at the problem in terms of its issues. If you can get to the root causes, address the root causes, because otherwise you're just addressing the symptom of the problem. Right, so roll call briefings are also common. The news conference. So this is probably more something in the line of what a lieutenant would do, but a sergeant might also be expected to handle a news release. Let's say that you respond to violent crime, you're the supervisor on the scene, and it's appropriate for you to make a statement to the media, then you can do that. So the news conference would be a situation, I recall one in Miami where there was a serial rapist loose, and the assessors, the candidates were asked to do a news release on that. Any questions so far?
When you were discussing citizen meetings, you said we don't do any role play. The assessors don't.
We don't hire role players at the present time. Now we want to give you general ideas of all the exercise types. A situation where we would use role players would create a lot of issues because you have to make sure that the role players treat every candidate the same.
Okay.
And that they respond consistently to questions. And in some role play exercises, there's been a lot of stress and a lot of conflict. And even though the entire assessment center may create stress and a little bit of hardship on you, you can overcome it. But there are some exercises. I've had the opportunity to go to about 24 different cities throughout my career with Houston. And I can tell you what they did in Philadelphia, in Chicago, Minneapolis, Miami, Denver, San Francisco. I've been to all those cities. And the role play exercise is quite difficult because it's very hard for the role players to treat each candidate consistently. And remember, one of the criteria is this has to be standard. If you have a candidate that is not handling a situation the right way, and the role player is prompted to respond a certain way, that candidate is getting a type of challenge that the other candidate may not be exposed to. So that might render the assessment center unreliable and perhaps even not valid. So there has to be a standardized approach, and I'm not sure that the sheriff's office intends to use role players. And we'll see one of the exercise types in a minute where it's actually the leaderless group discussion, for example. That's created a lot of conflict because every candidate is trying to do their best, and there can only be one true leader in a leaderless group discussion. So we'll talk about that. Well, that's the second one here. Okay, so but let's get to the town hall meeting. Remember, as a supervisor, you're going to be asked to represent either your commander, your lieutenant, at a town hall meeting, a public forum. You may be asked to make a presentation to Commissioner's Court. So these are all examples of the type of simulated exercise that could show the assessors whether you're a sergeant candidate or not. So, but with the town hall meetings, you'll usually have a crime problem to resolve. So think about what resources you have available in the sheriff's office that you can apply to the exercises. An example is let's say you have a speeding vehicles, you might want to get your traffic enforcement involved, right? So just get an idea of what resources are available to you at the sheriff's office that you can apply to effectively resolve a problem. Okay? So the leaderless group discussion, that one creates a lot of problems because the group is challenged to resolve a problem and make some recommendations, but not everyone can be the true leader. So in this situation, the group of candidates sit around a table, they're presented with a problem, and it's up to them to resolve the problem. So normally, if you're competing against the guy next to you, you want to be the first to speak up, you want to come up with the resolution, you want to come up with options and alternatives, but that's not how candidates are rated. The assessors sit around behind the candidates, and then they're observing the candidate comments and their behavior. So in your publication here, it talks about some people being good at facilitating, some people being good at mediating, some being a good person to manage time. So you don't have to be the leader of the group. If you come up with ideas, you contribute to the problem resolution, then you're going to score well on the leaderless group discussion. But again, that exercise is not common. Okay, role-playing exercise now. So many of these exercises can fit under this type of exercise. These are role players, like in Miami, for example, there was a new police chief, and he had a 4-point strategy to address crime. And it was something that he had published, and he wanted his sergeants to be able to not just state what the 4 points were, but come up with ideas, some innovative ideas on how to implement those strategies. And so the assessors were playing the role of commanders, and they could ask the candidates questions. For example, if they didn't properly identify one of the crime strategies, then they would be asked a question. So the difference on all the exercises between, let's say, a town hall or subordinate counseling or others is that you actually have role players that are communicating and interacting either with each other or with the candidates. The personnel resume presentation, this one is where you're usually given a poster and some highlighters, and you can create a visual aid to talk about your experiences, your education, and what makes you a good candidate for sergeant. Okay, and then there's a written exercise. So on the written exercise, the instructions will tell you exactly what you're expected to do, whether it's to write a memorandum, whether it's to develop an action plan. Just read the instructions carefully and then do what the written exercise asks you to do. So the written exercise will be evaluated on things like, did you follow the instructions? Did you present something that's logical and reasonable? What is your grammar, spelling, and neatness like? What is your sentence structure? Did you have an outline, and so forth? So the written exercise is also pretty common. Any questions so far? Okay, so those are the most common assessment center exercises. If you think about them, you'll see that they're good indicators of whether you can succeed as a sergeant with the sheriff's office. Okay, so now we're going to go over the performance dimensions. these are the behavioral constructs that are related to the performance that you should have as a sergeant, right? So oral communication. If you think of the, say, the roll call training scenario, or a scenario where you're doing subordinate counseling, you're going to be communicating with the person, right? You're going to be communicating with the assessors. You may be making a presentation. So this is how oral communication is defined. It's expressing oneself in an individual or group setting. It includes the ability to listen effectively and exhibit that you comprehend what's being told to you. The ability to make clear, concise, effective, and persuasive presentations of ideas or facts. To speak clearly and be understood. It includes the vocal variety, things like intonation, inflection, pitch, volume, and appropriate grammar and vocabulary. So you also are evaluated on nonverbal on this performance dimension, such as making eye contact, appearing to be actively listening, use of gestures, and then the listening skills. Included in this is things like confidence and command bearing. Okay, so here's another performance dimension. This is leadership. So how would you define leadership? So this is the ability to guide and direct others to accomplish tasks and goals. This is really a strong dimension that really can show assessors whether you're a sergeant candidate, a successful sergeant candidate. So it's the ability to give directions and obtain compliance through management of group processes, understanding the dynamics between personal and department goals, exhibiting self-confidence, and showing skill in teaching and training others. This also includes effective counseling, motivation, delegation, management of conflict between people, conducting effective meetings, monitoring work activities, and then establishing follow-up measures. So if you look at these dimensions and you are studying about how to approach a particular situation, one good approach is to take personal responsibility and say something like, yes, this is a responsibility I have as a sergeant with the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office, and this is the action plan that I would develop, and then go forward with that. So that's leadership. Okay, problem analysis and resolution. This is one dimension that will apply to every situation. It's problem analysis. It's the ability to identify potentially problematic situations and develop logical and appropriate courses of action to reduce or eliminate the problem. It's also the ability to isolate problems by collecting and evaluating relevant information, making a decision based upon fact analysis, setting priorities, consideration of alternatives, implementation of an action plan, and then evaluating that action plan. It includes flexibility and adaptability. It's the ability to analyze and synthesize information and resolve problems, issues, and concerns. So this is the essence of the assessment center. You're going to be challenged with a problem, and then you're going to analyze the information that you have, perhaps seek additional information from other sources like crime analysis, and then develop your action plan. I think the problem-solving book, from the few pages that I read in it, is probably a good book to help you on the assessment center. And the reason for that is it provided some case studies of what were effective resolutions of some crime problems. Okay, so then interpersonal skills. This is another important performance dimension. So this is also known as dealing with people. It's showing a genuine interest in subordinates, peers, citizens, or others, and with factors that influence their ability to perform their jobs. Showing compassion and empathy towards others, being tolerant of individuals of different backgrounds and cultures, and the ability to give and receive constructive criticism. It really has to do with interacting with others and being tolerant of other people and other cultures and other ethnicities. So notice that integrity and ethical conduct is part of this performance dimension. Okay, so that's interpersonal skills. Okay, initiative. So this is the willingness to address issues and problems and assume responsibility for resolving them. So it's the motivation to act proactively and exhibit concern for problem or the issue resolution. Ability to persevere in the face of adversity. And this is the ambition and desire to become personally involved in the problem resolution. Okay, so that's taking initiative. Any questions so far? I know this is a lot to take in, but hopefully when you get home you can take some time to leisurely read those and digest them, and you can do additional research if you need to.
How long the interview is going to be?
How long the interview is?
Yeah.
So depending on the exercise, they may be 15 minutes to a couple of hours. The actual, let's say that you were to get a writing exercise, that would be a substantial amount of time, maybe an hour or 2 hours. A town hall, a shift briefing, something like that, you may get 45 minutes to an hour to prepare, and then 15 minutes to present. And so the longer ones are things like an in-basket, you might get 3 or 4 hours. So it depends on the exercise. But you'll get on this assessment, you'll get 3 or 4 exercises. One of them will be a presentation, one will be writing, and the other one will be a means to determine your handling of different issues. Okay, so without revealing too much, but giving you a way forward, you'll have one oral presentation, a written exercise, and then another exercise.
And also, do you recommend any reading material?
Yes, I'll give you some reading material at the end. So, planning and organizing. So if you have an in-basket exercise, this is one of the dimensions that will evaluate your ability to plan and organize, because you'll be faced with several items and then you have to manage your time. So this dimension is defined as the ability to establish a definite course of action for yourself and others in order to accomplish a specific goal. So it includes the ability to use time effectively, to establish priorities, and then to ensure that those resolutions are carried out. So it includes the ability to use available resources, and many of these dimensions are related to other dimensions. Some of them truly overlap. Okay, so this one could be related to decision-making, delegation, interpersonal skills, problem analysis and resolution, judgment, and composure. So the performance dimensions that we're defining here are the ones that are most likely to be used in your assessment. Okay, so we don't have judgment because that's too nebulous. It's not clear. Also composure, that's another one. Okay, and then so another performance dimension is a written communication. So let's say, for example, that you're a supervisor and you have to develop a policy. This might be one of the exercises where you're conveying what you know about the policy and then submitting it in written form. So this definition is Communication of written language for informational, persuasive, and expressive purposes. Most of these written exercises will involve persuasive speech, where you're going to make a presentation, perhaps develop a lesson plan, an action plan, and then write to your commander or to perhaps a sheriff or someone in your chain of command. That's mostly what the exercises require. So successful written communication depends upon exhibiting a mastery of the conventions of written language, the facility with culturally accepted structures for presentation and argument, awareness of your audience, and then also other situation-specific factors. So effective communication of complex ideas in written form is key to exchange ideas at the central of academic enterprise. Effective written communication is a key qualification for many jobs. And certainly as a sergeant with the Sheriff's Office, you'll be required to submit some written memorandums, written action plans if you have a crime problem in a particular area, and then even things like your review of use of force reports, your review of pursuits, right? Because as a supervisor, that's one thing that you're going to be faced with, and that is reviewing the actions of your subordinates and then coaching, guiding, and counseling them so that they can do a better job, correct? Any questions so far? Okay, so another dimension is decisiveness. This is related to leadership, adaptability, delegation, conflict resolution, integrity, and leadership, judgment and leadership. So remember, many of these dimensions have overlapping features. And so this is true with decisiveness. Decisiveness is the ability to deduce logical courses of action from the data that's available to you, to establish proper work priorities and formulate rational decisions, and then evaluate the merits and potential courses of action. So remember, you're going to be solving problems. In one dimension that assessors look at is how decisive you are in coming to your problem resolution. And then the last statement there, it's the ability to take action and to commit yourself. If you're able to support decisions that you make with rationale